start, and the others will join us as they start. So welcome to yet another exciting session of Main Gate Darbar. So on MGD today we have Anirban, quite a mysterious fellow. Everybody wants to know what he actually does. And he's been doing some really fascinating stuff as we've got to know, and behind the scenes as he's been unraveling. So Pasna knows him since she's been a kid. So she has a lot of beans to spill. So I'm going to pass it on to Una to introduce him and take it away. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sajid. First of all, these sessions have been really cool, and because of the session, a lot of things that we haven't talked about, even though we've known each other forever, are things that we have discussed, and I think now we are really having work discussions, so which is really, really fun. So thank you for that, and thanks Anirban for trusting me to introduce and host this session. So you are quite trusting, I must say. But yeah, so for those of you who know Anirban, let's go with, you might not know his achievements. So before he gets in the way of all of that, let me just list out all the achievements that he has had. So around 2007, he received the BAFTA Award for Tsunami Wave of Disaster for Best Music Score and Edit, and also BAFTA nomination for the same film for Best Documentary. Then in 2012, he won something known as the Green Oscars, which is the Wild Screen Panda Award for his film Ganga, Ribbon of Life. And in 2017, for pioneering exploration, he won the award and grant from the Scientific Exploration Society. You can face palm, like you did when you messaged me about it. And in 2008, 2010, both years, he won Conservation Leadership Award and grant. These are very big words. He even won the Flash Forward Award for Best Interactive Website in 2002. Now, too bad Flash is dead. But anyway, but all of these major awards began with a grant to study something which most of us shriek at, it's just too many legs, is a grant to study spiders from the Indian Academy of Science in 1999. So congrats on all of that, and also congrats for being my oldest friend. Very few know that our parents were also good friends, and even before we were born. And his mother, Shikha Auntie, was a huge support, and she's like a multitasking super professional machine, as I always idolized her. And her sister is this goddess super sportswoman. So when I first met him, when we were around 9 years old, because I might keep saying this, so I might as well just give a disclaimer as to why I keep calling him some other name. So when I met him around 9 years old, when his sister Monu Didi used to call him Bhai. And so I called him Bhai. And then later I realized that even his mother is calling him Bhai, his father is calling him Bhai, his beautiful grandmother and really cool grandfather, even his neighbors called him Bhai. So that was for all of those people who know Anirban. Those who don't know Anirban, well, brace yourself. He is known to be very serious, extremely meticulous, highly self-motivated. He's also known to be seriously weird, as a lot of his friends have come to discover. So without much ado, over to Bhai from Bombay, Anirban Dutta Gupta. That's you.
Thanks, Una. It's like you started with the most embarrassing part of the whole thing. So all the while we were discussing, Una has been sending these like one-liners of all the embarrassing things hinting at all the embarrassing things that she's going to do during this session. So I'm slightly petrified. It started off well, but I'm always looking over my back to see what's going to happen next. So this Bhai has an interesting story. So it started simply because my sister started calling me Bhai, and then everybody found it easier to call me Bhai instead of Jotayu, which my aunt insisted on calling. So Jotayu is like a slightly more convoluted name, so Bhai kind of stuck. So when I was a kid, I kind of ran into a doorknob and I cracked my skull pretty badly. So they had to rush me to the hospital. And while, of course, I was howling away, the doctor was giving me stitches over here, and my mother kept saying, "Oh, Bhai, don't cry, don't cry, don't cry." And the doctor stopped doing what he was doing, which was stitching preventing the brain coming out of my head, and looked at my mother and said that, "What kind of a person are you? Have a Bhai so young? What kind of parents do you have?" So they were, of course, under the misimpression that I was I was her brother. So another story that she keeps telling me about my birth was about my childhood is my birth. So it's a story and it's an interesting story. And I think there's a lot of masala which has gone into it. So my maternal grandfather was a doctor in the Indian Railways. So when I was about to be born, my mother had gone over there. And so apparently the day I was born, not apparently, the day I was born, it was Mahashivratri. And it's a small town, Igatpuri, where I was born, and in the night, Mahashivratri. And everybody was anyway kind of clued into the fact that the doctor's daughter is going to give birth. So I was born with a hole in the heart, so I had a bluish tinge on my skin because of lack of oxygen. And the word spread that Shiva has actually come. And so they kind of, as the story goes that there was quite a crowd waiting outside the hospital to greet the new Shiva, and they were fairly disappointed when they were told that the bluish tinge has gone, and I was quite pink and healthy. So I'm going to share my screen, and I'll just take you through some of the.
So while you're sharing your screen,
Yeah.
I also want to quickly mention that I think one of the first times when I met you was when you had done a similar cracking of skull situation. And not only did you crack your skull, you had cracked your whole cycle into half. I don't know how.
Yeah.
I didn't know how to
Yeah.
cycle.
Yeah.
And so
that was because we were having a race and my cycle didn't have a brake. I knew it didn't have a brake, but I still had to win the race. So I kind of smashed into a wall. That was the only way to stop.
This entire thing today. So I can see.
So that's my, so I have an elder sister. That's my sister over there. And she looks very angelic, but when we were growing up, she was kind of not as angelic as she looks. And there are a lot of I have a lot of cousins, and most of my cousins are sisters. So they would come over home, or we would go over there, and of course I would want to play with them, and they wouldn't, of course, want me to be part of whatever activity they were doing. So the way my sister and my other cousins would kind of keep me out of the path was that they would make me into a dog. So I was the dog, their pet dog, and I had to sit outside the room where they were playing whatever, and every once in a while bark to make sure. So that was the role. So my life actually began as a role of a dog, and that's the actual dog that we had. And over a period of that's Coco, and over a period of time, we've had various other pets. But my love for animals, I think I can trace it down to my parents. So the house we lived in Calcutta, that my grandparents also stayed with us, and because they were there, everybody would come. That became the center of the family. So everybody would come, everybody would talk, and there would always be very interesting discussions, and people from very different backgrounds would be there and talking about it. So I always grew up in this whole atmosphere of various kind of individuals talking at cross purposes with various opinions and various stories, sort of thing. And then since there was and most of the people in my family are fairly more expressive than I am. They like to talk. So very soon I kind of figured out that I could get what I wanted without talking by pointing out or acting out. So that kind of stayed on with me for a very long time. And as most of you may know, that I'm not the most in a normal scenario, I kind of like to more listen than talk about it. So that's the family picture of our family. My mother's a lawyer. My father's an engineer, and they've been great inspirations in my life because they have never kind of told me what I need to do. In the sense that they've always been encouraging. They never went into that, oh, you have to do medicine or you have to do engineering. When I kind of got insects or other things at home, rather than shrieking, they would like look at it. So in a way, I would say that they have been the first and the person who's really motivated you to think, kind of give you the confidence into looking at things which maybe in another scenario people would consider to be slightly weird or out of the ordinary. So that's me with my parents, with my mother at the zoo. So zoo, we had a fairly large garden in the house, and my parents made a point that you had to go out and play every day in the evening, and it was never explicitly said, but it was implied that if you play, you have to come back with at least one cut or a scratch. So it was under this condition that I grew up, and every holidays, longish holidays, my parents would take us to the mountains and mountains or the sea, or there would be some fairly long, kind of a fairly difficult journey that we would make. This is our going to, I think, Kedarnath, Badrinath when I was 4 years old. And everybody would say that, oh, you're crazy, you're taking these guys to, at their young age, to these fairly difficult treks at that time. But nevertheless, they kind of made sure that they go with us. And one of the things that you learn when you're over there is that you make do with whatever you have. You make do with what food you get. You make do with whatever scenario you're kind of exposed to, and you kind of enjoy what is there. So you don't. One of the first principles of fieldwork that you have to do with whatever resources available is kind of was sort of inculcated when we were really small. And in these scenarios, actually, a lot of the life lessons were passed on by my father. I remember when we had gone to Almora, he kind of demonstrated 6 different ways that you could fall and not hurt yourself. You can fall on your back, on your nest, and so on and so forth. And all through the trip, I kind of practiced those 6 different ways. And it finally ended up, I became so good at falling that I stopped walking. All through the journey, I would just be falling and rolling and going down the mountain, not up the mountain. You can't go up the mountain when you're falling. We would go to fairly interesting offbeat spots, like this is the place where the man-eating leopard of Rudraprayag was killed. And there are certain experiences which kind of stay ingrained in your mind. And for example, at that point, this spot today is completely surrounded by building, but at that point, it was still in the middle of the forest. And somebody had just kept a metal aluminium plate in front of it, like the kind of plate you give food to for other animals. And you could just sense for that moment that the spirit of the leopard was still walking around over there and coming to feed from this place. I don't know who this random guy is. He has just come in, so I have no idea who that is. So I had a fairly exciting childhood that way, and this is the school that I attended till my class 10. So this school was, one of the founder of the school was my grand aunt, and it was sort of taken for granted that we had to go and study in the school. It's part of our own fairly well-known, sort of slightly alternative way of teaching, kind of influenced by Maria Montessori's thing and Shantiniketan way of teaching. We didn't have exams till class 5. Till class 4, we had they taught us things like how to butter bread and how to wash your own clothes and life skills, which in normal other school it would not work. But the flip side of it was that since it was a school that was started by a family member, everybody knew my parents, all the teachers. So while my mother's buying fish, they would come and complain about my lack of interest in studies. And one of the reasons I didn't have much interest in studies was that since all my other cousins and sisters had already gone in there, they were much better in studies. And I was like, it's really boring to be so good in studies. So because I was not that great in studies, I was forced to go to various tuition classes. And during these tuition classes, I met some of the most fascinating people. That's Mankuda, that's Dipankuda. So Mankuda taught me mathematics in my last few years, but he was a geologist by profession. And you go to his house and it was just filled with these fascinating examples of geology, crystals and fossils and things. So I didn't really learn too much maths from him, but I learned more geology from him. Similarly, Dipankuda was a fascinating ghost storyteller, and every time you would just wait for the class to end, because then he would sit and tell the stories of the ghosts he's written and so all through the way I would say that a large part of my influence of what I have become today is because of very strong, interesting, slightly offbeat role models that I've met along the way. So these were the real people, and there were also these not imaginary, but people who were out on the screen. So at that time, Doordarshan Sunday Special was the kind of show that we were allowed to watch, and then you had these.
One thing before you go to this section, I just want to mention quickly that there was, see, it's not all of Calcutta is not quaint like this. Yeah, before people start thinking that Calcutta is also, you know, old, you know, lovely, you know, beautiful. There are also parts of Calcutta where at the same time I was in an area which was newly developed, hard concrete. And so that was it, his school and this house that he had shown. It was like an open space, open book for people to come in and go out and all. So I quite envy you on that, but yeah, please.
Yeah, so we were not really in the old part of Calcutta, but it was not the not exactly the newer part of Calcutta either, and still had that old ambience of Calcutta over there. But coming back to it, so along with the really strong role models that were there, I also had other role models which I knew only through the screen. So, for example, David Attenborough, Jacques Cousteau, Jane Goodall, or Derek and Beverly Joubert, and I was fascinated by the life and the stuff that they were doing, and I ended up writing letters to all of them. And of course, I didn't know where they were, but I knew that they worked for National Geographic, so I would write a letter for them. It was very expensive to send it by airmail, so you wait for any relative to come from the States, and then you give it to them. Then it would go to National Geographic, and then you'll forget about it for a year or so, till a long-winded reply would end up over here. And not all, but most of them ended up writing, and these notes became sort of fairly inspirational for me. While I had a neighbor who lived in front of the house, his name was Shurajit, we used to call him Kutti, and he introduced me to spiders. So he kind of said that, so we would have this spider gladiator competition. So we would catch spiders, he had this tiny glass vial, we put it inside and we try and bet which spider would kill the other. It's not very ethical way to approach natural history, but that's how the interest. And pretty soon you realize that regardless if a spider is big or a spider is small, sometimes the smaller spider would kind of eat the bigger spider, and then you start observing patterns, and you start observing certain behavioral trait, and start observing certain things you start knowing. So suddenly something which was just observation and random suddenly started making sense and started kind of. So these are some of the pictures that, and from that point onwards, and I think I was fairly young at that time, maybe 5 or 6, but that was the key to my interest in the kind of not only the natural world, but also the insect world one can talk about. And of course, we didn't have cameras, we didn't have any other ways of documenting, so you ended up sketching and observing and kind of noting down things about them. So I started keeping this fairly detailed journals over a period of time, where every day I would write the observations of what. And one of the biggest challenge at that time was that pre-Google era, that you really didn't have access to information. So you had to remember things, and then suddenly somewhere you hear somebody talking about certain points, or you hear people, or you going through a magazine and you pick up one line, or you go to a library, you pick up, and that was how you started connecting all the information together. Because nobody would tell, okay, what kind of spider is it? And there was no expert around. So you had to kind of, so I think that again became the principle by which I started connecting the dots. I mean, you pick up an information over here, pick up an information over here, and you kind of put it together. My kind of interest in kind of spiders sort of continued over a period of time, and slowly it kind of became formalized. And of course, I didn't have a formal education in this thing. There was no scientist or an entomologist to kind of tell me that, oh, this is how you should observe. So I developed my own way of observation. So this is just a sheet which I kind of found the other day, where I've kind of noted down the way a male spider and a female spider kind of interacts with each other in the space. So it's per second, every second that you're looking at it, the way it is moving around. And I just kind of, as a way of sort of intriguing way to look at their behavior, I started developing this language of observation, which I started, and I had like reams and reams of paper. I tried for NID in 96, I think, but I didn't go through the first time. So because of my interest in zoology, I thought, okay, why not give a chance at studying zoology? So I went to Delhi University, Hindu College, to do zoology over there. And so, of course, a student in Delhi, fairly low pocket money. I stayed with Indra Dada and Archana Mashi for a while at their place over there. So in St. Stephen's College, they had this grand science paper presentation competition where the prize money was 1,000 rupees. And that was the motivation for me to kind of go and sort of say that, okay, this 1,000 rupees means that I'm going to have chicken for the next few days. So that was my calculation, and that's how I kind of went into the competition. And for the first time, I sort of, and it had to be a sort of formal paper presentation, something which original work had been done, and I really hadn't any information with me. So I thought that let me kind of formalize all my studies that I've been doing on the spiders, and I kind of run a paper through it. And this is one of the, and again, pre-computer age, so you have to draw it on OHP sheets. So I kind of synthesized all my findings of the spider world, of the spider interaction. And I kind of presented a paper which would be very dramatic. I said cannibalism in spiders, because I knew that is going to, rather than something which is very mundane and boring, I said, let's catch their attention. So it was basically a paper on how spiders try and outwit each other and kind of look at it with the principle that insects are as motivated by intelligence as instincts. So that was the principle of the paper. And interestingly, on the group of the panel who were judging that paper, the two of the leading experts on entomology in India were sitting over there, just out of chance. And they were fairly fascinated by this presentation. And they were also parallelly looking at intelligence in social creatures and social insects and so on and so forth. So they were like really kind of completely fascinated by it. And they kind of said that, listen, forget about your zoology that you're doing in Hindu College. Why don't you come and on the side, come and work with us in our lab. So, but what was very interesting was, for the first time, somebody who has done a formal study had kind of came out and said that, listen, what you are doing is correct. And that was a very important point for me, because suddenly I realized that you really don't need a formal education to kind of get into something that you're sort of passionate about. And if you do something very fairly systematically over a period of time, you can come up with results which can be acceptable. Leading from here,
just 1 second, because all of this is before college, so it's school years. So you're very, very. So you're,
so the paper was presented in college, but all the data was before the school years. Yeah.
So the sketches that we saw, everyone wants to know, when were those done? Was that sometime back?
No, these were done when I was, I think, between the age of 9 to 15, I think.
So yeah, teenage, when we are all over the place. You
teenage,
okay.
yeah. Fairly old, sort of
okay. All right.
Young kind of thing. So this kind of led me, I mean, there were a couple of intervening years. By then I had already joined the NID, but I was parallelly keeping in touch with these colleagues of mine. And they kind of suggested that, why don't you go to ISC and work to a more formal study sort of thing. So I said, I don't have money. They said, okay, don't worry. You speak to this Dr. Raghavendra Gadakar, who is the head of the ISC over there, and he will help you out. So I spoke to him and he said that there's a scholarship. Why don't you try for it? And things kind of worked out. But again, I'm kind of insisting on this point that I have met these amazing people who kind of don't take no for an answer. And if you meet individuals like that, you suddenly feel so much more confident in dealing with scenarios that could be challenging. So Dr. Gadakar was again one of those guys, and I'll tell him a little more. So I went over there, ISC, and I said, what do you want to? He said, why don't you go and figure out what study you want to do? So there's a large park outside ISC called Jubilee Park, and I was going for a walk, and I saw this hole over here without the spider. The first time I saw the hole, there wasn't a spider in it. And I was, of course, overconfident at that time, and I immediately stuck my hole over there. and I got terribly stung by a scorpion. So another life lesson was that never stick your hole down a dark hole, which you don't know what is there at the end of it. And so I got terribly stung, and of course I was hopping around. The next day when I went, I kind of observed this spider, and I said, oh, this might be an interesting subject to study upon. And then I said that, oh, to study it, I need to bring it to the lab. So I kind of did a section of the thing, and I kind of to catch it and collect it. And while I was collecting it, I realized that it had a small chamber on the side, which had hundreds of small baby spiderlings in it. So immediately I got everything. I came back to the lab and I kind of recreated this the scenario of the thing to kind of observe it. And the way you observe insect is that there's a special acid-free, lead-free paint. So you put in different colors, you put it on the insect in different, and you kind of map them out. So you know if a blue and a red is doing that and this is doing something, which was great. But the only problem is that insects after a point, especially spiders after a point, if they start eating things, they kind of shed their skin. So you do a study for 30 days and suddenly next day you come and all of them has shed their skin and you have no idea which one is what and who's doing what. So you have to start all over again. But what was interesting about the spider was that it kind of demonstrated this phenomena called extended maternal care. Spiders are cannibalistic in nature. So the moment they come out, if they find another spider and if they can catch it, they eat it. But for some reason, this spider, the mother spider, was taking care of the baby spiders. And you can see these are very rough, bad quality images. But you can see all of them are kind of stuck on top of their back. And it will go, and so it's here hunting a Coursera larvae, and it will kill it, but then let the babies feed on it. Which is quite strange to see in the especially in the insect world. So not only was this a very interesting phenomena, but it also kind of triggered that interest in looking at societies and structures and how interaction between individuals are formulated. That time I was still looking at the natural world, but going forward, it kind of extended to human societies as well. So coming back to Gadakar, that's an interesting side note. So to take these pictures, of course, we didn't have cameras at that time. The optics department, the physics department had gotten a dentistry camera, the camera that you used to look inside your mouth. They were designing some new optics for it. So I told Dr. Gadakar that, listen, this camera is lying around over there. Nobody's using it. Do you think we can use it? He said, no, I'm not in good terms with the physics department. But if you guys can go and take out the camera and use it and put it back without damaging it, then I don't have any problem. So he basically said, oh, you go and steal the camera, use it for your work, and then you put it back. And as long as I don't know it and nobody else knows about it, it was fine. So of course, then I had to go and make friends in the physics department and kind of figure out things. And we got the camera and we kind of shot this thing. So this, while my interest in natural world was kind of
interrupt you again.
Yeah, okay.
Interrupt you one more time. So, so one of the biggest things is, so you seem extremely fearless. Would I be right in saying that?
I don't know whether I'm fearless or not, but I mean, of course, you always get a little bit of, you think 100 times whether you're doing, but then at the end of the day, yeah, if you have to do something, you do it.
Yeah, so you cracked your skull multiple times. You don't care if there are breaks on it. You put your hand down a hole which you don't even know what's in there. Unknown holes. It's like, you know, so we are getting a sense that you're quite fearless. So, but from very reliable sources, who the source happens to be with us today as well, I hear that you are very scared of crossing the street. Is that true?
Okay, I know who the source is. And no, I'm not at all scared of crossing the street. I'm just careful of crossing the street.
Careful. All right. Okay, we'll keep that
in
mind.
Of course, I think the source, since the source has grown up in Gujarat, they have a different take on crossing the street, where you cross and you expect everybody else to stop for you. So yeah.
Everyone else, apart from Bon, we'll discuss who the source is very soon. But yes, that shall be revealed. And we shall move on to the next part of being fearless.
Okay. So while this whole thing about the natural world was going on, So I mentioned that school where I grew up, where I did my studies, Patubhavan. So Satyajit Ray was one of the trustees in the school, and all the child actors for all his films were taken from that school, and they were making the third part of this children's series called Gopiga in Bagabain and called Gopi Baga Pirelo. And so they needed some child actors. So where to come? They came to the thing, and I was picked up along with 13 other children to go and meet the principal. Of course, we didn't know anything about the film that was going to be shot at that moment. So they just came to class and they said you, and then marched off us to the principal's office. And all of us were like seriously thinking, oh my God, what have we done in the last few days that kind of brings us to the principal's office? And we are all like going through our memories and thing. And we said that we've done a lot of things, but nothing that kind of entails us to be brought to the principal's thing. So anyway, so we go into the office, the principal gives us a once over and says, okay, now you go. And then we are like still petrified because we don't know what is going to happen. So after a few days, there's a knock on the door. It's in the evening, and Calcutta is going through one of its power cuts, so there's no light in the house. And two of the teachers and one strange person along with them comes into the house and says, "Can we speak to your parents?" And of course, you know that there's something wrong. And so you scoot off to your room. They speak to our parents, and later on, it is revealed that it is actually they want us to take part, be part of the cast of this third part of the film called Gopi Baga Pirelo. I wasn't really that excited because I don't know, somehow it wasn't really that exciting for me. But the role of the film was, and I was kind of little confused at whether I'll be able to do the acting and so on. But it wasn't such a big deal because in the very first shot of the film where you appear, we are basically captured and hypnotized. So all through the film, you're nothing but zombies who really don't have to do anything. There's no acting. You're basically expressionless, which was great for me. Expressionless, wearing a black dress and doing things like cleaning the pillars and doing jharu pocha and massaging. You know, that was the film. The most difficult part was when my so-called father of the film kind of came rushing in and trying to wake me up. But of course, you're like a zombie and you're not doing anything. And he's like shaking you and said, Bikram, Bikram. And all of us are named Bikram. For some strange reason, that village has 11 children who have Bikram as their names. So, Bikram, wake up. And you're like not at all waking up. But the thing was, since it was the film shooting was going on for a certain period of time, of course, because of continuity, the clothes that they were wearing were not washed because we still needed that kind of crumpled look, and it was stinking of sweat. So the challenge was to like not kind of react to the sweat rather than not react to the acting. So that was more of the challenge. The shooting itself was the film being part of the film was exciting, but what was really fascinating was seeing how films work. And this is Indrapuri studio, one of the older studios. You still have those massive fans hanging from the ceiling on those mile-long metal poles. You have these old lights, and everything is done manually. So you measure the distance between the lens and the actors and the light meter. So that was, for me, was fascinating. And it was my first introduction to filmmaking as a process, as an art. So you suddenly realize that what you see is completely different to what it is in reality. So a beautiful mosaic is nothing but marble paper stuck on the wall. That the floor is something that if you want to do special effects, this is how you done. And that was what fascinating. And I think it was this experience that really kind of triggered off my interest in filmmaking. So I was doing zoology at that point. I wasn't really enjoying it because zoology was super boring the way they were teaching it over there. So I kind of made a list of things that I wanted to do. And one of the things was that I wanted to make films on wildlife. One other thing was I wanted to travel. And one of the things was I needed to be close to nature. And the only thing that kind of fit everything together was if I became a wildlife filmmaker. And the only place I realized I could, FTII was there, Jamia was there, but NID, which actually I didn't know much about, was the one which looked like the most promising candidate. So I kind of, I had tried NID the year before, so I tried NID again. And I got introduced to NID through Indra Dutta. So when he would come, we would all go over there and he would tell these fascinating stories about how NID was and how he could do various things and putting it together. So I gave NID again from Delhi this time, and fortunately I got through. And The interview again was, that's my laughter is because of the poll.
Yeah, it's perfect. I think it's very valid. Yeah.
So the NIT, so again, I think like all of us over here, the interview was petrifying because the one before you and the one after you has these stacks of amazing work that they've got and the portfolio is prepared. I had only got some sketches that I'd gotten with me and some miniature models that I had made of trucks. And Sethu was there, and Ravi Mukashi was there, and Aditi was there. And also the interview, Sethu was pushing the truck from one end of the table to Ravi, and Ravi was picking it and pushing it. And my focus was, it was like looking at a tennis match. I was just following the truck going from here and there. And my focus was that, oh my God, will the wheel come off at any time or not? So I really wasn't too concerned about what questions they were asking.
You should have told them to behave themselves and, focus on.
Well, the psychoanalyst was looking at me like that. So I was like, I don't think I should open my mouth than necessary. Well, so NIT was, again, I think it was, it's one of those spaces where if you really want to do something, it just gives you the space to do it. That's my batchmates, a beautiful picture of Abhi over here. So while I was in NIT, of course, you have the normal classes and things that you were doing. I was also kind of working in the zoo during the day. So I had been working in other zoos also. So right from childhood, I would, whenever, from the time I was allowed to be little free and move around independent on my own, I would go to the zoo. So I worked in the Calcutta Zoo. I worked in the Delhi Zoo. A lot of time. I remember once, so my mother's a lawyer. So she used to work in this building called Central Administrative Tribunal, which is like a massive, I think, a 20-story building, one of the tallest buildings in Calcutta. So we were going up in the lift. I had gone to meet her. We were going up in the lift, and her colleagues were there with her. And so they asked, "Oh, Shikha, this is your son, and what? So he will become a lawyer like you." So my mother said that, "No, I don't think so." Then said, "Oh, then like Parthuda, he'll become a engineer like him." So my mother said no. So then they got totally frustrated and said that, "Okay, what do you want to be?" I really wanted to be a zookeeper at that time. So I said that I want to be a zookeeper. And they were like, "This boy, there's no future for him." So they were like tutting. They kept quiet, but they gave me beer.
Maybe that's why you joined the NID Zoo, because
maybe.
So, and in that context again, there was one story which had come up during when you joined NID, in terms of someone, a very reliable source again, mentioned that we all have come to this understanding that you are not raggable. You're not raggable. You'll just be the way you are. So there's someone who is responsible for you getting ragged. So can I quickly have that person mention, and is he here, Partho?
Yeah.
So he has a story. He insists you say the story the best.
Partho is still paying back for that, huh?
So yeah, he said that you say the story the best. He said, I will not say it, let Anirban say the story, but there is a story here. So please let us know about this.
So Partha is responsible for the worst social interaction that I got.
Social interaction.
Yeah, I'm being politically correct over here. So as usual, I was on the 4th floor. Partha comes in his auto and he gets down, he looks around, and I'm the only one around, so he calls me down and he tells me that, "Okay, come, you help me get the trunks from the box room," which is, of course, has to be at the last extreme end of the corridor. And so I go, and I don't exactly remember who were there, but 3 of the most experienced seniors were in 3 of the rooms. So as I was walking past the room, so they would like stop me and said that, you finish what you're doing for Partho. You help him carry the box. But then from this hour to this hour, you have a session with me. Then the next room, from this hour to this hour, you have a session with me. And from this hour to this hour, you have a session with me. So it was like a one continuous long thing, and Partho is still paying for it. I think.
Yes, I don't mind paying for it. I think one of them was Prithvijit, who took you for a ride.
One was Prithvijit, yes.
Yeah.
I don't remember who the.
I also don't remember. I only remember from your stories. I don't know after you reached my trunks to my room, then you were left out to get ragged. So I don't know after that. You only know it.
Yeah, after that they took off my trunk. So
yeah.
scheduled social interaction.
Okay. So
Yes,
yeah, so I would go in the morning, early in the morning to work in the zoo from like around 5:36 to, and then come back. One of my responsibility was to work in the kitchen. So of course you start lowest off, you start cleaning the cages, and then you go into. And other day when I was looking through my things, I found this little note that a little note which says how to make food for hathis, and this is so it's fairly unreadable. My handwriting is not the best, but so the whole point was that I could do it. So that's why everybody was like, and Hajra was my roommate. I think in the first day, because I was doing this thing, I would go to sleep very early. And like most of NID, I think by 10 o'clock I would pass out. And Hajra was like super frustrated because he's like, boss, like I'm working through the night. How can you like sleep off at like 10 in the morning? So NID was one of those places where I realized that if you want to push yourself, it's up to you how much you want to push yourself. There's people, there's resources, there's everybody out there who's there for you to help you out. You have classes, you have amazing faculty, you have amazing library. The city itself is crazy. It allows you to explore things. You have a brilliant lawn. You have sports that you can do. So all the things that I really like doing, you could do in NID. Now, I didn't really get into too much trouble in NID. I think Ayaz had already been slapped by Manu Gajjar by then, so he had set the bar fairly high. So everything you do was like looked down upon. But the most amount of trouble I got into was because of Sanandan Sudhir. So he had the camera and he had this whole thing about going and taking pictures. He had the scientific bent of mind, and he also knew that I would. So I would make to do all the be the one carrying out the experiments while he would do it. So this is one of the experiments that we do. So we found this dead fruit bat. So we had. So after the initial picture, we said, let's be the real Batman, and I put it on my dress, and I was like doing all sorts of things. And this was in what is today in the exhibition design studio space. That time it was an empty terrace. Of course, we were doing all these things, and we didn't realize that there were faculty members who had cables on the other side who had a fairly nice view of what I was doing. And there was one faculty member who really didn't appreciate what I was doing. According to that person, it was disrespecting the dead. And he kind of really took up the matter.
I think you need to mention what this disrespecting of the dead is.
No, this is like, so we kind of put the Batman and kind of pretended to be Batman and walked around the campus doing various things. So that was the most amount of trouble that we got. The rest of the time, I used to get other people into trouble. With a fairly straight face, getting other people into trouble wasn't such a problem. So this is one of the things that got Ayaz into a lot of trouble. I don't know if Ayaz is there or not. But so basically, we wanted to get a skeleton. So we had this weird sort of theory that the hospital was full of people who are just waiting for death. So can we kind of create something which will motivate them to move on further? So we said that, okay, why don't we create a wheelchair which will have this whole human skeleton integrated on it? So when you sleep, the rib cage will come on the side, the skull will come from the top, and you take them around the thing, and that will kind of push them to make the journey forward. But of course, it was a little more complicated than we thought to get a skeleton. So we kind of shelved the idea. Ayaz's father had come down for something, and we were just generally talking about thing, and we said, oh, it's so difficult to get a skeleton. And my father was like, oh, is that so? Let me think about it. And after a few months, there's this box which comes, and Savli calls from the administrative office, Anirban, there's a box for you. And I come, and there's a big box lying in one corner which had been opened. Somebody had actually opened the box and kept. And he said, take the box and don't open it here, take it to your room. So I took it to my room and I opened it, and there was a whole skeleton inside the box. I have no idea how his father managed to get the skeleton, but somehow he managed to get a skeleton from different human beings, because the femur of one was like slightly shorter than the femur of the other, and so on and so forth.
But you guys, both of you are examples of, the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree kind of situation. Yeah. So, because we are seeing exactly that. Yes.
So basically we had a skeleton and we had to do something about it. So the only thing, so Basrai said that chal, we'll do it on my bike. And so that's us, that's Basrai working on the bike. We kind of stuck the skeleton on it and kind of put the rib cages on the side and things like that. And then he spray painted it. And by that time I was not in campus, so he spray painted and started riding around. And his stories are that every time you take the bike out, he would get caught by the cops. So Ahmedabad cops, I think he managed to kind of say, no, this is a kid from Dubai and all, this is not a real skeleton. But when he got into, I think when he got into Bombay, he got into more trouble. So he did the smart thing and passed it on to Zamir, so that let him get into trouble and not let me get into trouble. So
again, before you go into that, Ayaz had a message. He really wanted to join in. He couldn't get in. So he insists that you kind of made it precarious. He might have become a father or not. So I don't know what that means. We will get to know this maybe from you, from some other stories. So that is the source. He said, you put him into so much trouble. This is not the only one. This is a big question mark. We will not get an answer for this from this MGD at all. But these are questions that we can follow up when we meet you personally later as well, I think.
Okay. I have to recall.
You'll
I don't
be
remember.
named for certain things, so be careful. Yeah.
Okay. So, I've lost my thought. Okay. So, while in NID, I kind of wrote to all the wildlife filmmakers I knew. So, in India, I said that, listen, I'll carry your camera. You don't have to give me anything. Just give me a meal a day and we will I'll come and help out. So, nobody got back except for Shekhar Dattatri, who's a fairly well-established filmmaker from Chennai. So, he said, you can't work with me, but if you want, you can come and talk with me. And so I had to go to Chennai, so I had to figure out a way of going to Chennai. And I realized that there's this Madras Crop Bank over there. So I wrote to Romulus Whittaker to say that, listen, I would like to come and work with you guys. I have so-and-so background. I'm working in NIT and I can design blah, blah, blah. And I kind of sold myself to him that I'm the best designer around who understands wildlife. And said, yeah, come over and we are working on this new project where we are looking at breeding king cobras and water monitor lizards over there. So I went over there, and so these are some of the pictures from king cobra. That's two of the things about king cobra and water monitor lizard. And one of the days I just went off to meet Shekhar Dattatri because he said that come over. And I met him, and he gave me one of the most practical advice that he said that if you want to be a wildlife filmmaker, you have to learn everything. You have to learn how to not only make a film, but you also have to learn how to climb a tree. You have to learn how to fix a machine. You have to learn how to take apart a camera and fix it. And that's been one of the things that has driven me, that so that you kind of, you're encouraged to always learn and try out new things. So I spent a good amount of time with him, and then I came back to Madras Crop Bank fairly late in the night. It was evening. And if any of you have been to Madras Crop Bank, it's like you come in and there's a slight dune kind of thing. You rise, and the first thing that you see after you climb up on the rise are these two pools, which has around 500 crocodiles in them. And there is not much of a barrier. There's just hardly a 1.5 feet of barrier around it. So I went into the thing and I see everybody's running around with torches and things and shining torches into the pools. And you know that when you shine torches, the eyes glitter. So it looks like a star on the sky. And I asked this guy, hello, what happened? He said, no, there's some new guy who has come and we think he's fallen into one of the crocodile pits. And so we are looking for him. So I said, okay, give me a torch. So I also got a torch and I started looking around, and then we are going around, running around everywhere. When I met Nikhil Whittaker, he said that, hi Nikhil, what happened? Who's this guy? Who's this stupid fellow who's fallen into the crocodile pit? Nikhil looks at me and like shines his torch on my face and said, you're the stupid guy we've been looking for, because you told that you didn't inform anybody that you've gone out, and now you've come back and we've been looking for you all this while. We thought you had fallen into a crocodile pit. But what happened over there was that so the tribal community which supports the Madras Frog Bank in catching the snakes is this community called the Irulas, and they've been traditional snake catchers, and they're amazing at it. So every once in a while we would go out into the forest with them on collecting trips, and while you're walking, you suddenly see this guy just putting his hand under a bush and picking out a bunch of tortoise um, shells, tortoise eggs, or put a hand inside a hole and catch a snake and put out. And my question always was that, what is it that, what are the clues that you read when you are going through this thing, and that you can make sure that this is what it is? And initially they would never be able to communicate how they would do it, but eventually they sort of started telling things like, okay, no, when I'm walking, I see this, and I remember my grandfather telling me this. I see this scratch on the ground. I see this depression on the thing. I see this broken piece of leaves, and I remember my father saying this thing. And this was the time when I started getting interested in this whole idea about intangible knowledge and culture and heritage. In my final year, I got a scholarship. I went to Fabrica, which is in northern Italy. It's a design research institute set up by I, along with 4 others, that Joshi. We are trying to climb the Vesuvius, failing miserably. So Fabrica was a very interesting experiment for me because it had a completely different philosophy and design language altogether. So their thing was that you just have to create something that gives you 5 minutes of fun. And coming from this whole form follows function kind of design for others kind of background that NID had given, it was super difficult for me to kind of wrap around that. Sometimes you can do design which necessarily does not have to have some meaning to it. You can just be yourself. You can just express yourself. You can just have fun for the heck of it. So I was in the interactive department, and I worked on the online version of the Colors magazine, which was published from there. And so this was again, it kind of took me out of my comfort zone, and you kind of, the playfulness in your design and the importance of playfulness in your design sort of started coming out over here. Of course, while I was in doing all these things, I didn't really have a camera. Film was very expensive, so you started kind of noting down your experiences in your notebook. So these are some of the pages from the notebooks that I kept during my time over there. And this kira for keeping a notebook and kira for observation sort of continued. So this idea that you have to keep a notebook, and these are not pretty notebooks, these are just stream of thoughts. So everything that you observe, you just start putting it together and you kind of start drawing it. So things that you have, feathers, labels, observations about animals. And this kind of expanded to a degree, and it's reached a degree now that whenever I go somewhere, I not only make notes, but I collect banknotes, stamps, insects, feathers, interesting objects of interest. So that every time we come back from one of our trips, the custom always kind of pulls us over and we always get into trouble. But I really realized this importance of this note keeping and this whole journey of being inspired and kind of picking up things and finding the stories behind all these different material culture objects. I was shooting this film in Guyana on the Indian diaspora, and I really wanted to connect with one of the communities over there called the Maroons. Maroons are their origin is they are the escaped slaves who were brought into Guyana to work in the sugarcane fields. And because they had escaped, they are extremely difficult, and they had escaped many centuries ago, but they've always lived in isolation and they've always been distrustful of the outside world. So it was very difficult to connect, find them or connect up with them. In one of my trips to Africa, I had noticed this object called the matapi, which is basically a woven thing where you put cassava and you squeeze out the juice of the cassava so that you can have the cassava pulp from it. And actually, it's behind me in my wall over there. So while walking in the market in Georgetown one day, I saw this matapi hanging on the wall, and I connected these two together, and I realized that the matapi is originally from as an African origin. So most likely they would still be built by individuals of the African community. I went and talked to them, and through them, I kind of connected to the Maroon community, which otherwise, because I think if I look backwards, it wouldn't have been possible for me to finally connect up with them if I hadn't made this notation in my diary. So I had kind of built myself up with all these sort of thing, and so my interest has always been how do you apply design for the sake of conservation. And one of the first projects that I did was this conservation of this bird called the lesser florican. It's not a very large bird, it's a fairly smallish bird which comes to the grasslands of central India. And it has the male of it has a fairly interesting breeding display, mating display. I'm just going to play a clip. Hopefully it will play properly over here. Oops, sorry. So this bird constantly jumps from the same spot again and again, 500, 600 to kind of attract the females who are hidden in the grass. So our project was how do you maintain the grassland so that the species kind of gets protected, which basically meant that at this the same place where Salim Ali had also come, he had also kind of done a project, and it was a place of fairly importance. The species was highly endangered, critically endangered species. Only 1,200 of them left in the thing. But we realized for us to solve this problem, you couldn't work individually or in a silo. You had to kind of communicate with the various stakeholders, and the stakeholders included people from the forest department, who would, the farmers, the entrepreneurs in that area, the children, everywhere. So again, for the first time, we realized that to kind of communicate and to create a sort of successful design intervention, you had to bring together all the various individual parties to kind of come together. So this is one of the picture of one of the workshop that we did with the forest department. And the whole idea was to break the hierarchy inside the forest department, first of all. So not only the forest ranger, but the conservator of forest, they should all be able to communicate with each other, not only that. So this is one of the workshops. So the whole idea was that we tell them, and one of the exercises was that we tell them that you draw the lesser florican the way you think about it, thinking that they will all cooperate. What basically happened that the conservator of forest dictated how to draw, and the forest ranger ended up drawing. And you come up with a picture which is like this. So it really didn't work the way we wanted to do. But these were some of the interventions that we did. The other interventions were school outreach programs. So part of the project was making a short film, various short films in the local language. One of the thing was making a Bollywood-style music video, which you could show in the various festivals, kind of projected on the cable TV network, created this whole bioscope kind of experience. So we had gotten a bioscope, we had put all the information in it, and we would go around the thing and get the children to look at it. So various amount of school outreach. That's my partner in the project, Supriya. She was purposefully, we had decided that she will be the interface for it, principally because she's a woman, and we were also kind of working towards the biases of what the local biases were over there. To see a woman come, stand in front with all the other men around them and kind of presenting and telling them what to do and sharing their own story was a very powerful message. A lot of time what would happen after we would leave, you'll find these clumps of schoolgirls under a tree kind of waiting for us to come out because they would want to talk to her one-to-one. It was fairly low tech because it wasn't, we didn't know whether we'll get power or not. So using whatever means possible. This is an interesting story that we did. So one of the things that we wanted to do was have a community presentation, and we talked to the only film guy in the cinema hall owner over there. And we told them, we explained the idea, and he said that, yes, I'll do it. I'll show it before every film. It will be like a trailer before every film. And he said, I'll show it right now. And he started screening it. And very soon, initially, everybody was quiet. Very soon there was slight grumble. And then finally, everybody started chanting and screaming and giving galis to the projectionist. What is this that you're showing? And then he kind of sticks his head out of the projection window and shouts back at him saying that, if you don't keep quiet, I'm not going to show you what you guys have come for. And they immediately, like good boys, they became quiet and sat very over there. That didn't occur to me. So we showed the screening, and we called, when we spoke to the projectionist, I said, what is this other screening that you're talking about? He said, "No, no, you understand, na? Adult show ka screening hota hai dopahr ko. That is what they've come for." So obviously these guys was like super frustrated because they'd come for a nice blue film and we were showing conservation projects to them. We tried various alternative ways of communication. This is a picture come coloring book that was created with the workshop of the children the students had done over there. So the various school children kind of drew it out. Of course, we refined it. The whole idea was this is in English because we had to send it to our funders. The whole idea was that this then becomes a medium of communication with them. They can color it they want to, they can decorate it the way they want to. And what came out from this was very interesting information started coming out from here. Just by the way they would demonstrate, color it, add elements to it, we realized what was important to them and what was not important to them. And that kind of led us into thinking that, okay, if these are the elements which are important, how can we modify our campaign? How can we modify our communication to address those issues? Some shots of us working in the field, that's the height from which we would do large amount of observation. So you'd get up in the morning before the sun rises and stay there till the sun sets. Not very comfortable, but yeah. And this project was fairly successful because it showed, it kind of, on the ground success was that the number of breeding pairs increased over there. So the image on the left-hand side is from where we kind of did the project, where the community was quite for it. And the image on the right is from another site where we did not do the project, where Kharmor is the local name of the bird, where they've kind of scratched out the Khar and the O on top, and they've just said Mar Sanctuary. So it's just kind of reflection of the attitude of the local community towards the conservation project, how very different role of design can play in changing the communication. So along with my conservation work, I also—
Question about the conservation one. How long was that project? Like, was it, because it's definitely not just a film.
This project went on for almost 10 years.
Wow. Okay.
So it's only recently, and just I think a couple of months back, WCS has taken over that project, and now they'll be continuing. But by then we had fairly figured out the structure, so we wouldn't have to be there. We would go once in a while, monitor it. There was a field team who would work on it and get the thing going. So yeah, it was fairly long term, and one of the most important thing was I realized personally was that solution has to be tailor made. That you can't have a one size fit all approach. For every scenario, you have to figure out what works best. You can have a framework, but then framework has to be tailor made in it. So along with my conservation work, I also make documentary films. Once in a while I make corporate films or advertisement film, not too often. My interest is mostly in documentary and the idea of telling stories from the ground. So this is a film that we did on the Ganga, pollution in the Ganga, and that's a subject that has been done to death forever. So how could you? The challenge, of course, was how do you make that film different? How do you make that film different? And the starting point for any film for me is my experiences that I've had. And one of the experiences that I remembered from this was as a child when we had gone to Gangotri, I had gone and met this Swami Sundaranand, who was a fabulous photographer in his and the kind of stories that he had told. And I said that no, my story has to start with this guy because my journey in the mountains had started with him. So I went, and and he plays a very important part in the entire storytelling of the film. I make documentaries. When I work on documentaries, it is as if I'm making a fiction film. I script it, I create fictional characters, I write it. So I'm not going to read anything out of it, just that yellow highlighter. So just one example from the way I approach making a film is that once I write it, I know these are the things that I need to get, regardless of the fact that whether I get it or not. So one of the challenge was in this film was kind of showing the industry of death in Benares. And I really wanted to show the whole journey. Somebody coming to Benares alive, dying over there, getting cremated, and then what happens to his ashes afterward. I knew I'll get the latter part of it, but getting somebody to die on camera was something of a stretch of imagination. I knew that most likely I will not get somebody to die on the camera. So a couple of interesting stories came out while I was trying to do this sequence. One of the story was that I was shooting in Manikarnika Ghat fairly from a distance because I thought that I'll be kind of encroaching on the personal space of the individual who was cremating over there. When this guy whose father had died, he came over and asked me, "What are you doing?" I said, "Oh, I'm making this film for Discovery." And he said, "Oh, you're making this film for Discovery?" And he thinks for a while. "You mean to say his face will be all over the world? People all over the world is going to see his picture?" I said, "Yeah, probably." Then he said, "Why are you standing so far away? Come close." And he was literally pushing me into the fire along with his father. And his father obviously by then was half burnt and his face wasn't something which he wanted to flash across the world. But this thing kind of led onto the sequence that I really wanted to get. So I just finished shooting the cremation sequence. I was walking back and this really too hefty guy kind of accosted me. And I thought that they were the local mafia who had come to get the money. Then he said, "Oh, what are you doing? Are you a photographer?" I said, "Yeah, I'm a photographer." He said, "Can you take a photograph?" I said, "My mother-in-law is about to die. Will you take a photograph of her, of all of us together before she dies?" I said, "Of course, I'll take a photograph of her. I'll take things." So we immediately ran into one of the smaller ashrams over there, and we set up the camera. And I said, they all came together. They took the photograph, and I told them that, "Listen, I'll take the photograph for free. I'll give you the prints, as many prints as you want, but you need to allow me to shoot and use the footage." Okay. They said, yeah, we don't care what you do with the footage as long as we get the photograph. So I said, okay, fine. So I put the camera and I started rolling and I was looking through the viewpoint. And this lady, and I'll play the clip, and this lady was almost dead. I mean, she was dead by all effect. There was hardly any movement. So I was looking, and within around a minute into my shot, I could sense the point that her soul leaves, because there was this warmth that just passed through me. And immediately, very soon, within the next 15 seconds, everybody started crying. And so that was quite a strange, because I've never felt the presence of a soul. So I'm just going to over here and just go quickly to the clip.
In fact, you have a later.
Yeah, later.
No, we'll go to that later.
Okay, so this is the sequence that I talked about.
Every second, every minute, someone dies in an obscure corner of Varanasi. And immediately the barons of death stand by to take their pound of flesh. It is believed that if a person dies in Varanasi, Shiva himself will take the soul to heaven, thus breaking the cycle of rebirth. As a result, an industry of death has sprouted along the banks, feeding on the living dead who come in hordes to the city. The bodies of children and pregnant women are considered devoid of sin and are consigned directly into the river. Those who cannot afford the high cremation costs also float away the dead. While the bodies putrefy on one side, worshippers continue to bathe along the other bank, oblivious to the contaminated water in which they stand. Irregular power supply and poor maintenance, along with the strong-arm tactics of the keepers of the carts, means the electric crematoriums are hardly used. Even after cremation, there is no escape from the merchants of death. Only a small portion of the ashes are returned to the family. Most lie mixed with the burnt remains of the wood. These ashes and charred human remains are collected and strained in the river to extract any pieces of gold that might be left behind. The remains of the dead, it seems, belong to the keepers of the carts. Varanasi is just one of the cities dumping its waste into the Ganga.
The barons of death wait for their pound of flesh. Wow. And in fact, there's a question also about, what do you mean when you said that you felt the body, the soul leaving?
So, so I was looking through the viewfinder, right? I didn't really, I wasn't aware of what was happening. So my frame was just that whatever the frame, and it was a fairly tight shot of the woman. And the lady was, in all essence, dead, in the sense that very shallow breathing, there was no movement over there. And so I wasn't really, I was just looking at her, and there was no difference in her change in her body expression. Unlike any film that your hand goes like that or head goes like that, there was no dramatic, nothing dramatic happened. But I could literally sense there was a sort of a burst of energy which just passed through you. And I knew at that point that she had died, and the family also realized after another next 10, 15 seconds the fact of the thing, and then they started crying and holding her hand and so forth. But I mean, of course, on screen you really can't make out, but I know at what point she died, and it was like fairly. Of course, I was super excited. Like, yeah, I mean, I got the shot sort of thing. I was not really worried about how others were feeling. How others were feeling.
Oh no, but you got it.
I was like, yeah, man, I got the shot.
Oh wow.
So,
very powerful. Really, that whole segment is really powerful. So it always, every time we've seen it, you get chills down our spine as well.
So the other thing which I realized while working on these films, that no matter how much research you do, how much assumptions that you go with, there are always things that are fairly different to how you expect things to happen. So for one of the sequences in the same film where we wanted to go into the mangroves of Sundarban and look at honey collecting, so they have this habit of wearing masks on the back of their head to kind of prevent tigers from attacking them from the back. So I said, and they have this beautiful paper mache masks that they traditionally used to make. So I told them, you get your mask and we'll go and we'll do this whole sequence, and they're like, it'll be like real fun. So they said, yeah, we'll get it. So this is, so we kind of started the thing and said, okay, now you put on the mask. And the thing that pulls out are these cheap Chinese plastic ripoffs of Mickey Mouse masks. And they start putting it in the back. And I was like, what is doing? I want the traditional, super traditional thing that you used to use, the beautiful hand painted. They said, no, we don't use it anymore. That's too difficult. These works better with the tigers. Because for the tiger, it's like big ear, red eye, big mouth. For the tiger, it is much more scary to look at Mickey Mouse than look at the traditional human faces that used to sort of do. So this is the raw footage of the point where they take out the mask from their bags. Yeah, so I'm taking it, but I'm really cursing the person on the other side. So while taking the sequence also, so we went into the forest, we kind of took the sequence, and I was taking some B-roll shots, and I was a little behind them. And then I slowly start walking back to the boat, and I see every one of them, and you'll see that they are all like huddled in one corner of the boat, near the boat, and not being very quiet about it. And they're like, from a distance, they say, making it. So I kind of slowly walk, but I don't realize what is happening. So I'm walking in like chest deep water, taking kind of pictures and B-rolls. And then I come to the boat, I saunter over to the boat, they pull me up into the boat, and then I ask them, what happened? They said, no, there was a tiger very close by. I said, it would have really helped if you had told me beforehand that there was a tiger behind me then, like right now. So this is the point where they realize there's a tiger and they're not telling me about it.
Your point of view.
So that's me taking the other shot from them. So I'm completely oblivious to the fact that there is something over here.
So you are you are also doing the camera. You're also writing. You're everything. You're like a one-man band. Right?
Yeah, in the sense that I like doing my own camera because a lot of the storytelling gets constructed while I am shooting the thing. So you have a script, you have an idea, you have a way of approaching the thing, but then there are so many variables that are there that as and when the variables come in, you kind of start integrating it into the story itself.
So documentary is very much art. It's your way of looking at it at that point, at that moment.
Yeah, I find it very difficult to work with other camera persons, except when you're taking an interview. That time, if somebody knows the camera helps. But otherwise, because there will be certain things and I'm constructing in my mind and I can figure out, okay, if I take a snapshot of that, I will be able to put it over here. And a lot of the construction happens while the film is going on. Okay, I think we are kind of a little extended over here, but I'll go to the last part of my presentation. So currently I'm working on, along with the various other things that I'm doing, one of the most exciting and fulfilling work that I'm doing right now is working in Andaman and Nicobar Island with the indigenous communities over there. And this is something which has been going on for the last 15 years on and off. So Andaman and Nicobar has 6 different indigenous communities at various levels of integration to the modern society. This is a picture of the Jarawa community who over the last couple of decades have slowly started coming out of the forest and slowly starting to kind of have an interaction with the so-called civilized world outside. My introduction to Andaman and Nicobar is because of, I think Vishwajit is also here, is because of another person who I really look up to, and that is Vishwajit Pandya, who at one point was my teacher in NID, our teacher actually in NID, and then a colleague, and now more of a family and a friend. So just after I finished NID, Puntal suddenly gave me a call one day to ask me that, okay, what are you doing? Do you have any plans? If not, then we are starting this new program in DIICT. Would you like to come in and be part of the program to set it up? And I said, sure, I'll come in. And went there, and Vishwajit was the one heading that department, setting it up. And I went to meet him over there. And when I walked into a cabin, his cabin was like fascinating. It was, there were objects of axes and arrows and baskets and butterflies and this thing all over the place. So also the interview, we were basically talking about all the various objects. We really didn't talk about money. We really didn't talk about what my responsibility was. I remember Vishwajit telling me that I mean, don't you want to know about this place, what you're supposed to do, or how are the girls over here, or how is the food in the mess? I said, no, I'm more interested in the stuff that you have in the back. So in my mind, I was like, yeah, this is the place, and this is something which I would like to do. And fortunately, over the period of many years now, I have been able to be a small part of that journey. So my introduction to the island happened post-tsunami. When the tsunami struck, there was a community in Little Andaman called the Onge community, which was, initially it was thought that they had been wiped out because their settlement is around the coast. But then when the surveys happened, it was realized that not a single one of them had died from the tsunami, and they had all survived. And of course, the question was, along with immediate relief and rehabilitation, the question was that how did they manage to decipher the oncoming tsunami while people with better access to technology could not. So this became the subject of a film that BBC was making at that time, and they had approached Vishwajit to say that, would you be interested in going over there and making a small segment with the community where they tell about their interpretation of the phenomena that has taken place. So of course I was like, yeah, let's go. And I kind of tagged along with him. I did the camera work. And that was my first introduction to the island and to the community. So I'm going to share that small clip again on that.
So they have a secret source of information and sensors.
Yeah. Okay, so this is a clip from the film called The Tsunami Wave of Disaster. And it's kind of edited, so I've taken the chunks which has this Onge sequence, I put it together, so there may be little jumps, like you saw in the Ganga film.
The Andaman Islands in the Indian Ocean, directly in the path of the tsunami. The islands are inhabited by some of the world's most primitive peoples, and many feared that they'd been completely wiped out. But that didn't happen. All of them survived. Vishwajit Panja has been studying the Onge tribe on Little Andaman for over 20 years. Now he wanted to find them and ask them how they had lived while so many others had perished.
For a long time, I used to think that they were my, so-called subjects. But over a period of time, I have also made friends with them. I think there is a sense of sadness, there is a sense of dismay that things are not on the right course. But then on the other hand, I think their whole perception or their worldview is that the world is always going to collapse. Things are always disorderly. Everything is going to be dangerous and things would fall apart. Delicate balance has to be maintained. Each action has a sense of meaning to it. They philosophically think out the world. अभी देखिए एक भी कोरल नुकसान हुआ लेकिन कोई भी बेंचामी नहीं हुआ ना लेकिन ये जितना इन्हें ने है कितना इन्हें टूटा बेंचामी हुआ निकोबार में
लो मालूम नहीं ना तो मानता ये लो इसलिए वो जमीन में हिलाया इसी घर में रह गया वो बगान है इसलिए वो जिंदा नहीं तब मारी गया मतलब मालूम है ना पहले तो जमाना में था वो हमको मालूम है वो मतलब हिलाया चले गया जंगल में टिकरी में बैठ गया मतलब आ गया काली आदमी लो इधर ही भी है देते देते पानी वापस जाता
लेकिन ये पानी
ज्यादा वाला को आगे गया
जितना कम होगा उतना ज्यादा आएगा वो मुझे टोटाना की भी बोला
इसलिए हम लोग भी थोड़ा डर गया बच्चा लोग पूरा डराया पूरा रोते रोते इसलिए हम लोग बोला डरो मैं हम लोग का पहले ऐसी वोट होता था इसमें जूझे भी आता था जूझे का नाम काकी जूझे है बाकी कुंकाला ukundang karo ya bagi tamponu ya la kegatia kecile getagi enya member utuke atia dua toka vegananka Keci umur ni ne tahu Waya gija we ga te chiwo de gita game ba buati ga bela kwe gi bobegi limel ngure oba kwela ikutu guya lowai gija ka de ga kan bua bela kwika yodi waya ti wala kwe angata ti ale makebegi Nyagile jaba ti ingale wala kwe wagi kudu ti agi odi wa aga ibura tukwang ni nyale ta koto ta chilele ta ti dingene ti bela kenene Tia gai burata bela kikaka. Ale de ni wanala.
So beautiful. Unbelievable.
So yeah, so that was the beginning of my journey in Andaman, and over the years, it's kind of gotten more formalized. Vishwajit and others have set up this institute over there, so working with them in a more structured manner. One of the things that I find it very my own thought process when I'm working in such complicated scenarios is to kind of create models and maps so that you're not thinking linearly, but you're thinking in a three-dimensional manner. So this is something, a project that I had done with my colleagues while we were doing the Lesser Florican project there. The funding agency was also funding other projects. And this is from Colombia, a project that they were doing in Colombia, where they were trying to change the agricultural practices of the community that these guys are working for. This is a agricultural calendar that we had created based on the Mesoamerican culture, the traditional Mesoamerican cultures, integrating 2 or 3 different cultures so that they kind of know at what point, what kind of traditional crops to grow and harvest and so on and so forth, so that the land on which they were growing, that kind of returns to some levels of normalcy. So this was my first experience in constructing complicated graphical scenarios, which kind of, and I realized that if I do something like this, it helps me in visualizing the whole project in a fairly comprehensive manner. This is again one of the maps that we had all collaborated in and worked, where we are looking at the season and the seasonal availability of food and food resources based on the research that Vishwajit had done. And small clues of the size, what is available at what time, how it kind of flows, how the individuals move. And I realized that if I have maps like this, even though I'm doing a smaller part of a larger project, I know that, okay, certain aspects of it can get plugged into certain other things. Similar, some more mapping exercises, looking at the profile of the land to see what kind of stories can come out of it, what kind of influences can come out from parts of it. Looking at how do you read material culture, and how do you kind of, when you have a material culture object, how do you unravel it in a manner so that more and more, so this is not an object, but then you use that, you peel away the layers and you go deeper and deeper into it and try and understand what the community understands of it, kind of finding ways and means of making sense of intangible heritage and culture. So based on this thing, we've been working on a series of projects. Some of the recently completed one was on the honey collecting practice of the Jarawa community. So Una, I have one more clip to show. Do we have time for that? I think we've kind of extended our time a little bit.
But I think we're good.
We're good?
Because we are very into it. So
okay.
I would like to know if...
Then I'm going to show that clip and... okay, cool.
So everyone, while you're putting that clip up, everyone wants to know where can they see the films. So you will need to let us know if there's a way for everyone to see the films in some place, somehow, and see the work.
Yeah, the thing is that these works are not publicly available, unfortunately, because of certain restrictions that are there. But I'm sure we can have maybe an online screening session where I can show the work and people can see it. I think that would be the best way out of the constraints that we have right now on it.
So then part two.
Okay, so this is a small clip from the honey collecting film.
Things are getting serious for Athivedam and his team. While the youngsters look on, he carefully crushes the leaves and branches of the uwe plant and applies it to his body. Leaf extracts and never smoke are used to repel the bees. The Jarawas worry that smoke will kill the bees, whereas the smell from the leaves only dazes them. This is seen as Mangle, tricking and not destroying the providers of their food. All through the forest, honey collection is in full swing. In another part of the forest, Dohate sprays uwe leaf extract into the hive, disorienting the bees and driving them away.
Apa nak tepi cun nanti tak lagi. Iya. Malu ya dah hidup mana hidup. Ada dah jahe.
Having had their fill, the remaining honey is packed in the uhu. Along the way, the group stops for a bath. This traditional practice cools the body, which is necessary after drinking pure honey.
So this is another small clip which I'll just show you. It's another aspect of the honey collecting process.
Back in the jungle, more clues. Pegjup or bee droppings on the leaves are an indication of the hive being close by. Children watch avidly while the elders point it out to them. Back at the camp, carefully, with infinite patience, one stroke at a time, the inside of the uhu is painted with a delicate pattern, like that of a honeycomb. The Jarawas believe that the honey kept inside the painted uhu still thinks it is in the honeycomb and therefore retains its freshness. The outside of the uhu is painstakingly woven with shoots of orchid strings, usually by women. Weaving makes the uhu stronger, but is also a work of beauty and art.
We're quite speechless, actually.
Okay. So some like similar to like this honey collection thing. So looking at various other forms of hunting and gathering, like pig hunting. This, of course, the flip side of this is that you get to eat very nice, well-cooked wild pig meat. how women collect honey, collect potatoes, then some interpretation of how they see the world through their drawings, making necklaces. So the idea is that over a period of time, we should be able to at least the more important aspects of the community's intangible heritage and culture should be documented in a form which is then made, it works as a repository of knowledge for them and for the researchers and for the individuals and for the policymakers, so that if required, one can always go back and refer to it, and it kind of creates an archive of knowledge. A parallel thing is also trying to document the voices of the elders of the various communities and what they feel, how they see the changing world, what is the interpretation of the changing world, and so on and so forth. Of these two, both these ladies have passed away. So I have a small clip where she actually says something about
Bokal, the eldest Jarawa lady alive today, can sense it, and she is not happy at the ceremonial celebration of the honey season. A few months back, her old husband left her for a relatively younger bride, and she blames her ex-husband's changed behavior to the changing times that has impacted not just their marriage, but also the forest and other Jaravas in it.
Ya cedali tao dali biti la to tanade di biti ki chonda wora to dala de biti to dala de tai sho taga dolari tami agi uenge do tenaya ne tini jao ne ta ta le veti.
So the idea is that eventually we should have the, I think something very similar to what MGD is actually doing, trying to document the voices of the various individuals, but here trying to document the voices of the elders of the community.
So for this project, like you've been at it for a long while now. So how long have you been at this project now?
So on and off since 2005.
All right, so 15 years now.
Yeah, it's been 15 years now. Yeah.
So it's already reached, now you've got this whole bank of your interaction, your relationships. You, Vishwajit, all of you have given so much of your time and your effort and your life to this. So what are the next things, like as a community, as a design community that we are, are there ways that we can maybe participate in some way, or just, be of either moral support or otherwise support? That is something which would be great to know. I don't expect an answer right away, but it is something which I feel I would love to be able to contribute in any way possible. And this is just so much of learning philosophically, the way we look at the world. You are at it, you are in it. But when we see it completely from fresh eyes, it makes us, it really kind of shakes up where we are at. And with this current lockdown, the format that we are at in, it's really incredible learning. So please do share that at some point.
Yeah, maybe towards the end, I'll probably just add into it, because I'll think while I'm.
Okay.
So, so one part is, of course, also to go back and kind of show the community what we've been doing. Because it kind of brings out some of the most exciting observations from there. For example, when we showed the honey collecting thing, they were making fun of the people who actually participated in the film, and they were like, oh, these guys are doing it, like they're play acting, they're doing it too much, they're becoming too much of a hero. This is now how they should be doing. So there's an interesting interaction that for us, everything is novel and innovative and how it was supposed to be done. But then there's a certain sense of showmanship also that they bring to the whole experience. So various images, various reactions from the community. Of course, shooting over there is not very easy. because again, for various restrictions, not large crews are not permitted to bring over there. And also you would not want large crews to come over there because this requires a certain kind of mindset and perseverance. And I don't think very many people will be able to. It sounds very nice and exotic from the outside, but once you're inside and once you're getting bitten by ants all over, or mosquitoes and leeches all over, it's a very different experience. So for both these factors, it is most of the thing I have to do myself, including shooting. So some snapshots of where I stand. In a lot of times, my other colleagues who are there help in, or we always work with the social workers who've been there on the ground, and they always pitch in. And without their help, none of these would actually be possible, because they are the ones, they are the invisible forces behind us who actually take us there, help us carry the equipment, whatever we are carrying, and are always the one cajoling and convincing the community to do it once more time. And one of the difficult thing about this thing is, unlike other filmmaking where you have the option of maybe taking multiple shots and repeating the action, most of these times you cannot do it because they will either not do it or point blank say that, oh, we've already done it, why should I do it all over again? So just to get one more shot of them to do the same action is sometimes very, very difficult. They are like, oh, we don't want to do it. So just some images of how I work. So this is a creek in a place called Chaupuna. And it's a fairly deep creek, and the only way you can cross the creek and boat from the coast to the campsite is through these sunken barks. And I was so like, I couldn't walk over it, so I told it's very slippery, and my bigger concern was if I fall, I'll come up with what happens to my camera. So, but as you can see, these guys are like, just walks across. Some snapshots from Great Nicobar. This is the bridge that we completely rotten, damaged bridge that we had to cross over to go to the other side. And you can see like holding onto it and with legs shivering, you cross over, and there's a deep gorge below. Some more work shots. As you work, you constantly show the work. You kind of, like a normal trick, you kind of show what you've shot so that they kind of get excited by it. The extreme right shot is that when we were taking the shot, a snake, eagle flew over with a snake in its paw, and we are like only looking at it and not looking at the camera over here. As I mentioned, it's slightly strenuous on the body, so
slightly.
You kind of have a nice kinship with the leeches over there, because at the end of the day, they're like blood brothers, sort of thing. Crocodiles, fortunately, I've never encountered a crocodile over there, but it is an ever-present danger. The flip side, of course, is that you get to work and observe things and experience things which very few people have get the opportunity to do it. You get to go to incredible places where hardly anybody goes there, be part of a community which very few people have had the chance to look at. So the top shot is from Chaura, then various places in Great Nicobar and Andaman, Middle Andaman Islands. Of course, none of these things is possible without the individuals who are part of it. And I think Vishwajit is still there. I'm not sure whether he's there or not, but he's the driving force. Then there's Manish, then there's various other, over a period of time, you become great friends with. So that's Abbas, who's our driver over there. So he drives around, and not only does he drive around, he's become like your buddy in the process. So the individual. Okay, he's there. Okay, so so it's the individuals at the end of the day, and that's what I realized for all my project. It's actually the people who kind of take it forward. You may be the face of it, but it's actually the giants behind you who are driving you forward. So that's in a nutshell what my journey has been. And interestingly, some of the individuals who I've been following for ages, who's been great inspirations to me, I've managed to actually meet them in flesh and blood. That's Jane Goodall and that's David Attenborough. But the most interesting story is with this couple, Derek and Beverly Joubert, who works on the lions in Botswana. And so I had sent them a letter long time back, which kind of took its own sweet time through National Geographic to go reach over there. And they were very kind enough to respond back, which again took its own sweet time to reach me back. So I was in NID at that time, so it finally arrived in that little letterbox over there. And I opened it, and they had a very sweet note saying that, thank you very much, but we don't accept interns. But if you're really interested, we look forward to your career, blah, blah, and we hope to meet one day. And we finally ended up meeting, and they actually remembered writing back that letter, because I said, oh, you probably don't remember me because so many people write you. They said, yeah, maybe, they said that, no, I actually remember you because yours is one of the few letters which actually reached us in the boondocks over there. I'm sure a lot of other people write, but we mostly don't get letters. And I'm very happy that whatever, it finally reached us and I responded. So that was a sort of fan moment for us. That's my...
weird boy. They remember the weird boy who wrote.
So that's my partner in crime,
Oh.
who thinks that I can't cross the road.
And who also kind of lives with all those creepy crawlies and other things that you kind of bring home.
Not only that, she kind of, she's a big part of the process of putting everything together. Here she's devouring 2 Caucasians at a time with a bite. That's her agenda in life. And that's Una over there in the middle. So
yeah, I was taller than him. Proof.
Yeah.
And that's her goddess sister. Yeah.
Okay, so I think I think I've kind of super extended the time that we had agreed upon. Sorry about that.
But I think the way it is, it's really like we need a part 2 because we need to see the films. And so that's really, I don't know if everyone feels that way. The messages seem to say that. There's so many messages which are coming in. Yes, please, we want to see the film. We want to have. So all the films everyone wants to see. So you have got to make that possible.
So yeah, so now I'm like full of Sajid is there. I'll keep quiet.
Don't worry. We could have gone on and on. Amazing session, Anirban. There's so many people who came and said you must get Anirban on the MGD sessions. Now I understand why. You're quietly there, but the kind of things you're doing, it's brilliant. And you can see from the messages that, we really didn't want the session to end. And it shows that, right from childhood, your passion, how you pursued it with a major focus. And, you've gone out of your way to do stuff which meaningful. And you've also brought the whole design, this thing into it. So it was an amazing session. Thank you so much. And thank you, Una, for making sure you brought out from childhood all the aspects to what's made him who he is. So thank you so much.
He's got so much stuff. We don't know, like it's just editing. So, but it's just he's got so much stuff, incredible. So we can have many more versions. But thank you so much for
thanks Sajid. And
Anirban, I'm going to put some people on spotlight so you can see who all have made it to come and see your show.
Hey, Pushkar.
Pushkar, you're seeing after a long time.
Hey, Kavita.
There's one guy who only comes for his batch sessions. Everyone knew. Last year, now he's come for yours, like digital lottery.
Hi. Really amazing work.
Great work. Thank you.
Thanks, Zainab.
It's Grishma who's going to teach you to cross the road.
Yeah.
Hanky who was distracting Alan. Alan was distracting.
Yeah, Thank you so much.
Alan was distracting everyone else.
Hey, Chana.
Hi. This is the first time I've come on Zoom. I've been watching these sessions on Facebook, but today I managed to make it because Anirban, of course, as you know, is my classmate, and I've always been fascinated with his stories, and I just wanted to, go through it all over again. A lot of it I have heard about.
Thank you, Chana. I'm like feeling emotional now. Okay.
Oh, no.
Beautiful, Anirban. Thank you.
Thanks, and thanks, Sanjini. Hey, chats. Hi.
Hi, Ani.
Rupali. Hello, hello.
Dudarsho.
Thank you, thank you. Hi, Shalini. Long time.
Hi. I do hope Sajid's going to do the screening of your films.
Hey, Chris.
Hey, Bon.
Hey, hey.
Hi.
Lakshmi. Hi.
Hi. I have something for you. I'll connect you later.
Okay, okay. Yes, yes. Please.
Since you collect spiders and all, just see if you can count how many hair Sandeep Sangaru has in his nostril with his angle.
Okay. I'm not going up that dark hole.
You learned well.
Yes.